Hello students, hope you all are fine. So let's start with another topic for learning, and today's topic is menstrual cycle. Okay, so as usually we will start with learning objectives. At the end of this lecture you will be able to understand physiology of menstruation. You will be able to know the amount and composition of menstrual fluid. You will be able to indicate a role of corpus luteum, which is very important endocrine gland in the menstrual cycle. You will also be able to describe the hormonal changes that occur during the menstrual cycle, and that is a very important topic, right, that we are going to deal with detail. And finally you will be able to define disorders which are related with the menstruation, right. And once you are able to define, definitely this understanding will help you in understand endocrine pharmacology, right, which will be a part of your study in the higher semester. Okay, chalo, so let's start with the menstrual cycle. Menstrual cycle is also referred as uterine cycle, okay, because the changes which happen during the menstrual cycle are actually the changes in the a layer of uterus which is called as a endometrium, right. So these cyclic changes that happens in the endometrium under the influence of the reproductive hormones, that is gonadotropin releasing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, estrogen and progesterone, right. So definitely there is a 3-level management which we have learned: hypothalamic hormone, anterior pituitary hormone, and then finally the hormones from the gonad. That is how we deal with. Okay, so if someone asks you define menstrual cycle, so you need to say that these are the changes, cyclic changes that occurs in the endometrium, right, innermost layer of the uterus. Metrium refers to uterus, right, and endo refers to innermost. So this changes, right, definitely they on an average they are of 28 to 29 days, right. We are considering as an average because in some women they are been found of because that 21 days, right. Some women they are found because even more than 40 days, right. So if you take an average of this, it will be somewhere around 28 to 29 days, right. It's a biological process. So in that case a variation, right, biological variation is always a possible, right. So this changes definitely happens in case of female, and female also we are discussing primates, right. Primates are the most developed mammalians, right. So say for example monkeys, right, human, right, these are considered as a primates. Apart from the primates, in other animals there also cyclic changes do occur, right. Changes in the estrogen progesterone level do occur, right, that is how they reproduce. But then these changes are referred as a estrous cycle, they are not referred as a menstrual cycle. Why these changes occur in a form of a estrous cycle and why not menstrual cycle? That could be understand from a fact that if there is a loss of blood, right, during their life cycle, that could cause a problem, various problems. Say for example these animals, they are daily they are craving for food, so food is not that easy for those animals, that is one thing, right. So loss of blood can be life threatening in that case, that is one thing. Second thing is, if by chance if food is plenty of food is available, then also the presence of blood at some places where they are residing, that could serve as an indicator for their natural predators, right, their enemies, and those enemies could easily trace. So it's you can say that a matter of life for them, and that's why there are no menses in such animal. There is presence of estrous cycle, right, which shows the natural variation in estrogen and progesterone, right. So I hope that you understand definitely. But these changes are, as I told you, in the animals other than the primates. Say for example you will understand in pharmacology that rat undergoes such type of changes in estrogen, which is referred as a estrous cycle. Okay, chalo, let's move toward the details of the menstrual cycle. Definitely first menstruation, right, that occurs in the age of puberty. and that is somewhere between 11 to 14 years, right. That is the age of puberty. Definitely there are lots of criteria in developed countries and developing countries. We are not going to get in the details, right, because in some countries even the age of 8 years is considered as a normal, right, for menstruation to be started. But on an average in Indian condition you consider that age between 11 to 14 years is considered as a puberty, and that is defined as a menarche, right. So, menarche is first menstruation, right. Why this first menstruation is initiated? The reason is very easy, that it is under the influence of this female sex hormone, that is estrogen and progesterone. Definitely this estrogen and progesterone has to be released only when there is release of FSH and LH, that is gonadotrophin, and gonadotrophin can only be released when there is a GnRH, that is gonadotrophin releasing hormone, right. So, it is ultimately until the release of gonadotrophin from hypothalamus, right, that such changes in, you can say that estrogen and progesterone could happen, right. So, the reason is the age of puberty, you have release of gonadotrophin, which ultimately leads to release of estrogen and progesterone, and that leads to menarche. Okay. Just like we have understood that what is menarche, definitely you also need to understand what is menopause. Meno refers to again menstruation and pause refers to stop, right, and this normally is observed between the age of 45 to 55. Okay. And in that case what happens is, because of the natural aging process, right, once you get older then these ovaries become non-functional. Okay. And then after, definitely because this gonadotrophin releasing hormone is now stopped, that is why the changes in estrogen and progesterone also will not occur. That is referred as a menopause. Clinically, menopause is defined when there is no menstruation for 1 year. Okay. If there is no menstruation for 1 year, then and then it is considered as a menopause, otherwise not. Okay. So, I hope you are very clear with the menarche and menopause now. Now, we are going to get into the physiology of menstruation, and for understanding and based on the changes in the hormones, you can definitely divide in 3 different phases, right. So, day 1 to, right, we are considering that the on an average duration of the menstruation is 28 to 29 days. Based on that, first 5 days they are considered as a menstrual phase, because there is actual bleeding, right, there is loss of menses, that is why you call it as a menstrual phase. Second is day 6 to 14, during which there is development of follicles, ovarian follicles, that is why you call it as a follicular phase, or you can also consider that there is a proliferation of ovarian follicles, right. So, that is why it is also referred as a proliferative phase. Some of the books they do suggest that there are 4 phases. In that it is nothing but just you are subdividing this phase, that is day 6 to day 14 into 2 different phases, that is day 6 to 13, they are considered as a part of follicular proliferative phase, and day 14 is considered as a ovulatory phase, right, that is on the on day on which ovulation could occur. So, definitely you can divide like that also, it is just making subdivisions, nothing else, right. So, definitely we will get details in details of this, and the last phase is from day 15 to day 28, and that is called as the luteal phase, because there is a development of corpus luteum, right, and corpus luteum secretes lots of hormone, right, it is a very important endocrine gland, and that is why we call it as a secretory phase also, right. One by one we are going to get into details of this. So, starting with the first one, that is menstrual phase, right. So, it is definitely, reason is there is a lower concentration of female sex hormones in the blood, right. Now, we will understand this changes in the hormone with a diagram, right, that will be a better way to understand these changes. Say for example, this is a menstrual cycle, or what you call as a uterine cycle. So, I have shown here the changes in the endometrium, right, and this is what we are discussing right now, right. So, day 1 to day 5, right. So, during which, right, there is presence of menses, there is loss of blood, right, and there is loss of uterine layer, right, that is we call as a endometrium. Now, corresponding to this we are showing changes in hormones, and that changes are shown by two way, right. One I have shown is ovarian hormone, right, that is the hormones from ovary, estrogen and progesterone, and second is the pituitary hormone, anterior pituitary hormone, that is FSH, and this blue lining indicates LH. Okay. These are simultaneous changes which happens in case of ovary, and that changes I have shown in a form of a development of an ovarian follicle, right, various stages, right, for the ovarian follicle. Okay. So, let us check wherever there is a uterine, you can say there is a loss of this menses along with the blood, right. Menses is actually the endometrial lining, that is referred as a menses, right, because the mucosa is lost and that is being termed as a menses, right. So, this menses, whenever they are lost, as you can see that there is a least level of estrogen, right, as compared to this higher peak. Yes, you can just check. Similarly, progesterone level here, if you compare, then also it is at least level, right. So, there is a least concentration of these two. Okay. Even in LH also you will be able to find that the concentration is very low. Yeah, but FSH definitely is slightly higher. The reason is because gonadotropin releasing hormone just start stimulating the FSH release from the anterior pituitary. That is the reason why FSH is slightly higher, right. It is not that high, but still the levels are still been higher, right. But why there is a breaking down of the endometrial lining? The reason is the lowest level of estrogen and progesterone. Okay. So, why they are low, that also we will try to understand, but this changes what I mentioned in this slide, that I tried to correlate, right. So, reason is the lower concentration of female sex hormone in the blood. So, definitely this mucosa, right, that is epithelial tissue, along with the lots of, you can say, broken arteries and veins, right. So, that will result in a bleeding, and that will come out definitely through a passage which we refer as a vagina. First it is through cervix, and then definitely it is through the vagina. Okay. And reason is definitely, as I told you, that there is a breaking of endometrial lining. Now, this bleeding, right, you should be knowing two things, right. What is the composition, because that we have mentioned in the learning objective, right. So, one thing is what is the composition of the you can say the fluid, menstrual fluid. So, in that case primarily it is having the mucosa, that is endometrial lining, right. Second thing is because of the breakage of the arteries and veins, right. So, that is why blood, and then you can have, say for example, a remnant of the developed ovarian follicle, because it is not fertilized, so somewhere it is going to loss, right. So, such things are present in the menstrual fluid. And how much quantity of blood is lost, right, that is a very frequent question that we should have, right, we should ask to ourselves. So, in that case it is again variable, but then on an average you can consider 40 ml, right. The values may range from 10 ml to 80 ml, right, but then on an average it is 40 ml which is considered as a loss of blood during this period. Okay. So, these are the facts related with the composition of the menstrual fluid, and how much quantity of the menstrual fluid is lost, that we have tried to understand. Now, how much does it last, right? We are considering that day 1 the menstruation has been started. So, definitely it should continue, right. We are considering this phase from day 1 to 5. So, on an average the bleeding, right, major bleeding which is observed is ranging from 3 to 5 days, right. So, from day 1 to day 3 there is a presence of blood. In some women it may last for 5 days also, right. On an average you can consider as a 4 day, right. Now, normally this menstruation happens when there is no fertilization, right, because endometrium is developed because of the higher level of progesterone, and this progesterone is ultimately responsible for, you can say that, maintenance of a pseudo pregnancy state, right. Endometrium, why it is developed is because it prepares the uterus for implantation, right. Now, if fertilization does not happen, fertilization means the ovum has meet sperm, right. If this process has not happened, definitely now progesterone level will go down, estrogen level also will go down, and that results in, you can say that, breaking down of this endometrial lining, or what we call as a slogging of, right, of this endometrial lining, right. And if, say for example, this a breakage is not observed, such a case definitely it is indicative that fertilization has happened. Okay. So, if menstruation is absent, is lacking, it is a chance that the pregnancy could have occurred, right. Again we are showing possibility, it is not a always case, fine, because sometimes the menstruation could be irregular also, right. So, it may extend, right. Say for example, in some women what we normally consider the phase of the menstruation is, your menstrual cycle is 28 days. In some women it may occur, these changes occur at the span of 35 days or maybe 40 days also, right. So, that is possible thing. Or there could be some other factors also, say for example, there could be some disease, there could be stress, right, there could be issues regarding the health, nutritional status. These all can also result in you can say sometime oligomenorrhea, right, which you can say is infrequent menstruation, or it could result in amenorrhea also sometime, right. So, this all conditions you need to consider, right. It is not always a case that lack of menstruation is there, it is always an indicative of problem, but it may be, right. Most of the cases it is considered as a indicative of, you can say, that pregnancy, right. I hope this details which I have discussed are clear, and that is what, as I have shown, right, as an you can diagram here, right. So, this is FSH, right, this is ovarian follicle. If you remember my last lecture, then definitely this we consider as a primordial follicle, right. Primordial follicle is a very simple structure where you have ovum, right, primary oocyte, right, which is having, you can say that surrounding flat squamous cells, right, and those cells eventually will now develop under the influence of FSH, right, because follicle we are calling it as a follicle stimulating hormone. So, it will lead to development of follicle. So, here is a developing follicle that is being shown. Okay. Once a developing follicle results in a primary oocyte and then into a primary follicle, right, and then into a secondary follicle, then there will be development of theca interna. Okay. Theca is a surrounding layer, right, surrounding this follicle, and definitely again you need to refer it to the previous lecture, right. There are two layers, theca externa which is protective, and theca interna which is vascular and cuboidal and secretory in nature, and that is a primary source of estrogen in this ovarian follicle. Okay. So, definitely this is the structure, right. So, primary follicle and then secondary follicle, right, but definitely this will discuss in the second phase, right. So, until now it should be clear, right, what happens in case of menstrual phase, right, what happens in case of between day 1 to day 5, that is what we have discussed. Okay. Now, there are some myths regarding the menstruation. Definitely we are not going to get into religious part, right, but definitely woman is advised to take rest during this phase, right. Now, if you consider current scenario, definitely the life of a woman is comparatively easy with the advancement in the household facilities, right, that we are getting. So, right now if you compare, definitely you will not be able to get idea, but if you compare somewhere around 30 years or 20 years ago, then a life of woman was quite was full with the struggles, right. So, lots of heavy work, right, and that case, right, maybe it was a scenario that to just get rest, right, for this from this all heavy schedule, right, or heavy, you can say that work, it was maybe it was the reason, right, that a female or maybe a woman was not allowed to enter in the kitchen, right, not allowed to go into the religious places, right. So, it was just maybe this is again my assumption, from what reading I am having, right, that is what I am speaking, that is the reason why in some cases, right, during this menstrual phase women are not allowed to do the work in kitchen, right, or maybe in the religious areas, right, they are not allowed to enter. The mythological concepts or maybe the concepts that were designed by you can say at that time, right, where maybe to get rest from the physical activities, right, the burden that a woman, right, was carrying, right, that is why. Second thing is, sometime there is a very common question that is been arising in like I said person, right. Say for example, just maybe just married people, right, they do have a query that whether it is safe to have sexual intercourse during the phase of menstrual phase or not, right, when menses are there or not. So in that case, definitely science does not have such type of restriction, right. But in that case you need to consider that there are lots of changes in the vaginal cavity, in the cervix and in the uterus, right. First uterus, because it is been broken, right, as we have mentioned that there is a breakdown of endometrial lining, so it is exposed for infection, right. So because there is a presence of blood, so any you can say external you can say that a part, right, that is having the bacteria or maybe fungus, that could lead to an easy infection. That is one thing. Say cervix is also more dilate, right, and vaginal pH also is higher. Normally vaginal pH is acidic, right. Why it is acidic? Because of the presence of anaerobic bacteria. During the phase of the menses, definitely this anaerobic you can say flora, vaginal flora is disturbed, and that results in a higher pH of the vagina. So protection is less, protection in terms of protection from bacteria, and in that case definitely chances of infection are high, right. So that is the reason why the sexual intercourse should not be promoted, should not be advised, right, during these phases, right. So these are common myths, again we are discussing, right, general knowledge that is related with this phase, right. So moving toward the second one is the day 6 to 14, and that, as I told you, that it is referred as a proliferative or a follicular phase. Now key changes that occurs during this event, right. Now as we have said that under the influence of FSH, right, we have learned in the diagram that FSH is primarily released, and this FSH leads to development of follicles. So primordial follicles get converted to primary follicles, primary follicles get converted to secondary follicles, right. So I have not shown a detailed pathway here, but definitely this will result, primary follicles will result in development of the secondary follicle. Now when you have this development, when you have a transformation of primary follicle into secondary follicle, definitely there will be a separate theca, right. Theca means a layer, covering layer, that will be developed, and once a theca interna is developed, definitely now there will be estrogen, right. Remember that initially secondary follicles you only have release of estrogen, no progesterone is released, progesterone is only released from the corpus luteum only, right. Corpus luteum definitely releases both estrogen as well as progesterone, but here there is release of estrogen, right. So under the influence of this FSH and you can say that estrogen, now there is a regeneration of endometrium which has lost, right, during the first you can say 5 days, right, first 3 days. So now the regeneration process through proliferation has been started, okay, and ultimately this secondary follicle also will become fully mature, and you know that fully mature you can say that follicle we referred as a Graafian follicle, okay. So let's check the hormonal changes. As you can see that here just effect of FSH, so development of follicles. Once this theca is developed, now you can see that estrogen levels are rising, progesterone are still at the base level, right, but then progesterone estrogen level definitely they are rising, okay, and they are attaining a peak phase, right, which is when the mature follicle is ready to be ruptured, okay. So this is because a theca is a well developed structure. Now you know that there are two types of feedback system in the control of hormone, right. One which is very common, you all know, is a negative feedback system. Say for example, there is thyrotrophin releasing hormone which stimulates thyroid stimulating hormone, and TSH will stimulate T3 and T4, you all know that, right. T3 and T4 if they are increased, they will give a negative feedback to TSH and TRH both, okay, right. So lots of time we have discussed, I am not getting again revision of that, but here estrogen is a rare example which follows positive feedback cycle, right. You heard it right, that it is a positive feedback cycle. Positive feedback means more the estrogen, it will again send a message to the GnRH that release more GnRH, release more FSH, release more LH, right. This is a rare example, right, along with the oxytocin, which we have discussed somewhere in the earlier classes. Okay, oxytocin also follows a positive feedback loop, right. Here also there is a positive, but remember that this positive feedback loop for estrogen is only when it is alone. When we will discuss a case of estrogen and progesterone combination, there it is a negative feedback loop, okay, which we will discuss in next slide. But here just check, under the influence of FSH, under the influence of estrogen, the level of FSH attains a peak, level of LH also will take a peak, right. And this, whenever there is an highest level of LH, wherever there is an highest level of FSH and estrogen, that leads to a characteristic event what we call as a rupture of a mature follicle, and that leads to release of secondary oocyte. This we call it as a ovulation. This ovulation occurs exactly on 14th day, considering that the average duration of the menstruation cycle is 28 to 29 days, right. So it's a mid phase for a menstrual cycle. Consider that if the menstrual cycle is for 36 days, then the day of ovulation will be 18. It is as simple as that. If menstrual cycle is of 20 days, right, then the ovulation happens at 10th day, right. So it is exactly the mid of the uterine cycle, okay, and that definitely once the ovulation is there, it will result in a corpus hemorrhagicum, right. This is a mature follicle, right, Graafian follicle, and this is corpus hemorrhagicum, right. And also you can observe the regeneration of the endometrium, right. Now it is been regenerated, it is now again you can say through the proliferation, because there is a proliferation, that is why you call it as a proliferative phase, right. Proliferation of what? Proliferation of this endometrium, that is why proliferative. And follicular, because there is, because that development of ovarian follicles, right. So these two names, right, that has to be understood, why we have given the name follicular phase, why we have given the name the proliferative phase, that has to be understood. Now I have not shown the temperature, right, the one column can be added here, right, body temperature. Wherever there is a characteristic event, that is attaining a peak of FSH and LH and estrogen, also body temperature gets raised, right, and that could be measured by thermometer also, right. So some old family planning methods, they are based on the measurement of temperature, right. Definitely these are natural method of family planning, right. When someone is trying to get pregnancy or someone is trying to avoid pregnancy, both cases, then you definitely are interested in ovulation, right, because wherever there is an ovulation, then and then there is a release of secondary oocyte, which if could meet sperm at the ampullary isthmic junction, could result in a fertilization and pregnancy, right. Now if naturally you do not allow this ovum and sperm to meet, right, and that case definitely pregnancy could not occur, right. Or maybe someone is willing to get pregnant, then in that case the best way is to have the meeting of sperm and ovum, right, between this phase of ovulation, right. So on an average we are considering 14th day as a time of the ovulation, but as I told you that it's a natural process, right. So there could be biological variation, and then in that case it is 11th to 17th day, right. Between this day it is considered, right, that if a copulation has been done, that is sexual intercourse has been done, then it could result in a pregnancy, right. If sexual intercourse between 11 to 17 has been done, then it will result in a pregnancy. So this is the best period for conception, or if someone wants to avoid the pregnancy, then they should not have unprotected sexual intercourse between this phase. It is as simple as that, right. The temperature based method also can be used, but it is not advisable, right. Definitely all natural methods of family planning, they are full of error, right, because these are all biological processes which we are dealing with, okay. So let's move to the phase we are discussing, right. Definitely we have understood the changes, and reason also is very clear, that there are rising level of pituitary hormones, anterior pituitary hormone, that is your gonadotrophins, and ovarian hormone only estrogen, remember, because only theca cell is there, okay, theca layer has been there, fine. So Yeah, this increase in LH is in particular very important, right, and that is referred as a LH surge, right, maximum level of the, you can say that LH, right, rapid secretion of the LH, that is a characteristic one which induces this rupture of Graafian follicle, right, and this process is called as a ovulatory phase. As I told you that some of the reference book you will find this as a separate phase. There are 4 phases that they are mentioning, right, apart from the proliferative. Ovulatory phase is considered as a separate phase, right, or simply you can call it as a ovulation that happens on the mid of the, you can say that, this menstrual cycle. Okay, I hope it is very clear to you, right, this phase that we have discussed. Moving toward the third and the last phase, that is day 15 to day 28, which is called as a luteal or a secretory phase, right. So now there is this Graafian follicle is ruptured, and this Graafian follicle now will get transformed into corpus hemorrhagicum. Immediately corpus hemorrhagicum will start synthesizing a protein which is called as a lutein, which is yellow color, right, and that is why it is so called as a lute refers to yellow and in refers to protein. So protein which is of yellow color, that is lutein, and from this lutein protein it is referred as a corpus luteum, right, and now corpus luteum starts secreting large amount of progesterone, not also progesterone, estrogen also, but the changes in progesterones are quite rapid. You can just see that as soon as corpus luteum is being started, now you can just see that rise in the progesterone, right. So that is a characteristic event which happens in, under the influence of this progesterone there is a huge development, right, anatomical development that you can see, right, in the endometrium. This development has to be there because it is now preparing for implantation. If fertilization has occurred during this phase, right, wherever there is an ovulation, if by chance fertilization is been done, then definitely the implantation will occur in this, you can say, endometrial lining. So for that reason this endometrial lining is thick, is now vascular, right, vascular because if there is an implantation, then definitely nutrition will be provided through this structure, right. There should be a structure what you call as a placenta which will be formed somewhere here, okay, in the endometrium. So it becomes thick and vascular. So highest development of endometrium will occur, right, and if fertilization does not occur, definitely then also these changes will definitely occur under the influence of the progesterone, what we call as a pseudo pregnancy, right. This phase is referred as a pseudo pregnancy, right. So it is developing the uterus for the possible pregnancy, that is what I am trying to say, that is why I am using the word pseudo, okay, and that case definitely now, yeah, here also estrogen also will be synthesized. Remember that corpus luteum synthesizes 3 hormones in a normal woman, right, non-pregnant normal women, it will synthesize progesterone definitely, estrogen, and third is inhibin. Inhibin because wherever there is an excess of follicular development or excess of FSH and LH, so in response to that, to control the level of FSH and LH and to restrict the follicular development, that is what the role of inhibin is. Again the word, as the word says, inhibin, right, which inhibits a protein which inhibits, right, inhibits the follicular development, excess follicular development is called as a inhibin, right. Inhibin is also synthesized, right, is also synthesized by this theca cell, right. So here also estrogen and inhibin both are synthesized. Here also estrogen, progesterone and inhibin, all these 3 hormones are synthesized. There is one more hormone from corpus luteum, that is called as the relaxin, but relaxin is synthesized only in case of pregnancy, otherwise not. We will discuss why, okay, but that in the later slide. So these are the changes, and now you can just see that this hormonal changes, if progesterone is high, along with that if estrogen is also high, this will result, right, this what you call as a this is a 1 plus 1 11 like effect, right. In pharmacology what we call as a it's a potentiatory, right, it's a kind of a additive, no it is not additive, but I am just not getting the word, it is what you call as a potentiatory effect. Right now you can, I am not getting the word, actual proper word, but potentiatory effect is like, just like it is not 1 plus 1 2, it is 1 plus 1 11, that sort of effect could be observed, and ultimately this too will inhibit the you can say anterior pituitary as well as the hypothalamus to suppress the release of, because to suppress the level of, because that FSH and LH. Okay, so that is what is been shown in this case, fine. So this is regarding the luteal phase. As you can see that the endometrium lining is developed, and there are lots of hormones which are secreted from this gland, what we call as a temporary endocrine gland, because it is staying for 9 days, right. So it is, you can just see that these are the 9 days for which it stays, right. If there is pregnancy, it will stay for 9 months, right, and that's why progesterone is referred as a pregnancy maintaining hormone, okay, because until the progesterone levels are high, uterus will be as it is, right, it will be developed, right, this endometrium lining will be there. But once the progesterone level, estrogen level falls, then it will slog off, it will fall off, okay. So that's why you call this progesterone as a pregnancy maintaining hormone. If there is no implantation, if there is no fertilization, finally corpus luteum after 9 days will degenerate, and then it will result in a corpus albicans, and then there will be start of new phase, right, new menstrual cycle will be followed, right. So this is regarding the luteal phase, secretory phase. We have discussed all of this, role of progesterone we have discussed, role of corpus luteum also simultaneously we have discussed, right, that we have mentioned the learning objective. Definitely in absence of fertilization, as I told you, corpus luteum will degenerate, and then it will result in a corpus albicans, right, and definitely this will result in a disintegration, right, that is breaking off of the endometrium, leading to a new menstrual cycle, okay. So with this we have completed all 3 phases, right, of the menstrual cycle. I hope you have understood these changes, especially these changes in hormones. These are very important, right. LH surge we have learned, right. If someone asks during the ovulation what are the changes, right, in the FSH, LH, estrogen, progesterone is still not there because corpus luteum is not there, fine, but estrogen is at peak level, FSH and LH is at peak level, right. Similarly for any phase, if someone asks you, you should be able to correlate these changes in these 4 hormones, okay. That's a very important information. This also you will be applying somewhere where you will learn drugs, you can say modifying the effect of estrogen, drugs modifying the effect of progesterone. In pharmacology it will be very helpful to you, right. Same of this, you can diagram I have mentioned in a detail, and all 4 hormonal changes in a single curve, right, in a single graph, right, I am trying to show here, fine. So this is the follicular development, this is a ovarian cycle. So primordial follicle, primary follicles, under the influence of FSH this development will occur, right, which will result in secondary follicles. Secondary follicle, now estrogen level will get up. If alone estrogen is there, FSH and LH also will go up, right, because a positive feedback loop. Then under the influence of LH, corpus luteum will be formed, and now once corpus luteum is formed, progesterone level, estrogen level will go up, okay, and ultimately with this effect of these 2, progesterone, estrogen, FSH and LH level will go down, okay. It is as simple as that. So with this we have completed our topic. This is the hormonal control. You can just see that gonadotropin releasing hormone, wherever release will stimulate the gonadotrophins, that is FSH and LH. This FSH definitely will lead to development of the follicles, right. Here I have shown here, you can just see that, right. So these are the growing follicles, right. This is the phase, right, that is shown in the ovary, and then once this FSH is been enough, is leading to the development of secondary, right, here it is the secondary follicle, then it will lead to release of estrogen and inhibin, okay. So this is regarding the, you can say that now this definitely also LH will also affect once there is a rupture of, you can say, Graafian follicle. Now LH will come into action, and then that is, it is actually under the influence of LH that this ovulation will come, right. So LH surge is a very characteristic event that we have learned. Also development of corpus luteum, right, that's why the luteinizing hormone, you can correlate this word. And now you can say that this, both of these, right, FSH once been released, it will lead to release of 2 hormones, that is estrogen and inhibin. Estrogen alone, it follows the positive feedback loop. Inhibin, it controls this estrogen, right, and this GnRH, FSH and LH release, okay. And regarding the LH, you definitely have 4 hormones, as I told you. In normal non-pregnant woman, it is estrogen, progesterone and inhibin. In case of pregnancy, there is release of one more hormone that we call as a relaxin. What is relaxin? Now this relaxin is a peptide, right? It's a protein, right? You can just see that IN refers to protein, and relax, that is one which a peptide which produces relaxation. Where? Relaxation in the myometrium. You know that myometrium is a middle layer of uterus, right, which is of smooth muscle, right, made up of smooth muscle, and then under the influence of prostaglandins, under the influence of you can say that you can say oxytocin, right, there could be contraction of this myometrium. If contraction in myometrium happens, then the embryo, right, the fetus which is growing inside the uterus will not be stable, will not be able to grow properly, right. So there could be a chance that it lead to abortion also, right. So to prevent such contraction, uterus need to be relaxed, and to relax that, corpus luteum at the time of pregnancy also releases relaxin. That is the reason why it is only observed during the pregnancy. Okay. So this definitely a hormone. Wherever these hormones are present in excess, definitely it will result in a negative feedback loop. But remember that negative feedback loop only will happen then when there is estrogen and progesterone combined. Okay. Now again we are revising. GnRH from hypothalamus will stimulate anterior pituitary, that will stimulate release of LH and FSH, will go to the ovary, and ovary will release estrogen. Initially under the influence of FSH only estrogen is there. If estrogen alone is there, it will lead to a positive feedback mechanism. But if LH is released, which will lead to estrogen and progesterone both, then it could result in a negative feedback mechanism. Okay. This definitely both of these are having a very important functions, right, regarding the development of uterus. Okay. So I hope now the loop, overall loop, right, from the hypothalamus to pituitary and pituitary to ovary is clear. Okay. And cyclic changes, if you remember this fact that estrogen alone is a positive feedback, is having a positive feedback mechanism, and these two combinedly are having a negative feedback, that means they are stopping the release of these two, then it is very easy to understand what changes in the hormones happens in case of the menstrual cycle, right. I hope you are getting. There are, you can say, lots of disorders which I need to discuss. Firstly, I should mention that during these hormonal changes, right, it happens, right, many women, it has been observed 30% in 30% women it has been observed that before menstruation cycle, right, that is the first day 1 to day 5, right, before 1 week of this menstrual phase, there are some changes which are related with the behavior of female, and that are definitely related to hormones, right, and that is sometime it is considered as a premenstrual disorder, right, that may result in depression, sometime it may result in anxiety, right. So such type of changes are normal. Some cases, right, 3 to 7% of the cases these symptoms are severe, right, and that they are considered as a disorder, that they are considered as a to be treated, or maybe counseling with the doctor will help. Okay, fine. Second thing is, because these hormonal changes, right, can also lead to changes in level of estrogen, progesterone, FSH and LH. This could result in other hormones also, right. Say for example, during the phase of menstruation, sometimes there are cramps, abdominal cramps. Those cramps are because of high level of prostaglandins, right. So such symptoms, right, such abnormal, I would not say abnormalities, but such type of symptoms, right, could be observed during the menstruation or before the menstruation, right, which if they are not severe, they are not considered as a disease, right, they are observed routinely and frequently. Okay. Let's check definition of some of the menstrual disorders. Oligomenorrhea, right, wherever this word is there, rhoia, right, that refers to flow of what? Meno refers to menses, right. So the flow of menstruation is oligo, if you remember, oligo is not very less or not very high, right. Say for example, oligopeptide, oligosaccharide, monosaccharide, you know that glucose is a monosaccharide, starch, glycogen, these are polysaccharides, right. But if a molecule is having maybe 7 or 8 sugar molecules, what you call as it is not a polysaccharide, it is oligosaccharide. Okay, just like that, if there is if there are infrequent you can say menstrual cycle, right, frequency is not too high or not too low, right, if it is irregular then it is called as a oligomenorrhea, right. So infrequent menstruation period, that are referred as a oligomenorrhea. Polymenorrhea refers to definitely frequent periods, right, frequency least in a normal range we consider 21 days, right, as I told you that we are considering average 28 days, but the range could be as low as 21, as high as 39, right, and on an average we consider as a 28 day, right. But if the frequency is even more than every 21 days, that means frequent periods are there, then we call it as a menorrhea, polymenorrhea, right. Menorrhea word is now common, you understand that. If this frequency is totally absent, right, there is no menstruation, then we will refer it as a amenorrhea, right. A refers to absence, and absence of menstruation, right, that is called as a amenorrhea, right. So you can understand on the basis of frequency we have divided this menstrual disorder in a amenorrhea, oligomenorrhea and polymenorrhea, right, very easy to understand. Chalo, hypomenorrhea, that means short periods or light periods, right. So normally we consider that on an average the menses, right, they are observed between day 3 to day total, right, from day 1 to day 3 or maybe day 1 to day 5, right. And in that case if it is shorter than that, only one day is there, right, so menses are observed only for a single day, so in that case it is called as a short period, that is hypomenorrhea. If very you can say long periods are there, longer than the 7 days, then you call it as a heavy or a long period, right, where it is referred as a hypermenorrhea, right. In that case you can say that you need to use maybe medical devices like tampons also, okay, and sanitary napkins also, maybe you can say you have to use every hour, right. So that could result in a very difficult situation, right, it could lead to weakness also, right. So that is hypermenorrhea. Dysmenorrhea, dys refers to painful, right, say for example dysuria, so dys refers to painful and urea refers to urination, so it's called as a dysuria. Similarly dysmenorrhea, that's a painful menorrhea, right, that could be because of infection also, right, it could be because of some other abnormalities like polycystic ovarian syndrome, which you will learn in higher semester. So these all are because a reason for the dysmenorrhea. And amenorrhea, as you discussed, that it is showing the absence of period, okay. So with this we have discussed most of the details, and small assignment for you, right, so that you can whether you can check whether you gained knowledge through this lecture or not. So you may define these, right, terms like menopause, dysmenorrhea, amenorrhea. You can check some references like reference books like Tortora, or maybe say for example Rosen Wilson, right, these are very good books which you can use for the answer. Which hormones or maybe analogs of hormone they can be given to prevent pregnancy, that is contraception, right, what you call as a contraceptive pills, right. So you need to identify hormones that we have discussed that could be used as a contraceptive hormones, and second is maybe if analog of these hormones, that also if you can find, that could be very important, right, that could be very helpful for further knowledge of pharmacology for you. And then last question from my side as an assignment is, which days of menstrual cycle are considered as best to have a conception or best to get a pregnancy, right. So this all details which I have discussed here except the second question, right, we have discussed somewhere in our lecture, okay. So I hope you will be able to cover it, okay. This I will not answer it because definitely we will discuss this wherever we will discuss pharmacology of such hormones, right, then it will be better to understand these effects, but still if you try to find out, it will be helpful as far as the knowledge is concerned, okay. I hope you are liking my lectures. If you do like my lecture, please subscribe my channel, right, that is my request to all of you, right. Why? Because every time I need to send this in WhatsApp group, okay, and you may not, sometime you may not get such messages, and that you may it may lead to loss of very important information, very important lectures, right, or you may get a delayed information. So once you subscribe my channel, then definitely you will get updates regarding these all lectures. That is the only reason. Fine, thank you very much.